Conversations podcast.
Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Conversations, Translation and Interpreting, coming to you from Wurundjeri Land. I'm your host, Fatih Krakis, and today we have a very special guest joining us. I'm thrilled to introduce to you Carl Gene Fordham, the newly elected National President of the Australian Institute of Interpreters and Translators, otherwise known as AUSIT. Carl, welcome. How are you going?
Thanks, mate.
Thanks for coming. Before we dive in, if you do enjoy our podcast, please remember to like and subscribe and share it with your friends and network. Your support does help us bring more insightful content like this to you. So please settle in and join me in welcoming Carl Gene Fordham to the show. Carl, welcome again. How are you, mate?
Doing great. How are you?
Good, thanks. Thanks very much. We are just out of the 37th AUSIT National Conference that we hosted here in Melbourne, and you came all the way from Brisbane. How was the conference for you?
Overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed?
And moved are the two words I would use to describe it.
Fantastic. It was the first time I got to spend a little bit more time with you as well, running around between presentations.
It was a lot.
Helping out guests along the way. And thanks for your help as well. I mean, even though you haven't been maybe in an RMIT building for 15 years or so, you were an RMIT person, weren't you? You're an RMIT student.
I was among the first graduates of the master's program for translation and interpreting.
Did you feel home?
Yeah.
Was Building 80 there when you were there?
No, we didn't have that amazing building, unfortunately. It was still being built.
Yeah, amazing, but a bit of a maze.
Yes, you can say that again.
So definitely thank you very much as an RMIT alumni for helping out as well.
Of course.
It was much needed. How does it feel for you to step into this new role?
Pretty amazing. It's the first time I've ever taken on a role like this in my life, and the faith that fellow members have put in me to take on something like this, it's very moving.
I mean, it's a very important role. It's a national role. We have over 2,000 members, with many branches around as well, and some big shoes to fill too.
Yeah, Erica, no pressure.
No pressure at all, but it was, as sad as it is to see her go, it's great to have some new blood in the mix as well, and I'm sure that Erica's going to be helping you as the immediate past president if needed.
If needed, but I said to Erica, we love you, but we won't be bothering you because she really deserves that break.
Have some well-deserved rest, right?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Look, before we get into your plans for AUSIT, let's introduce you to our viewers, to AUSIT members, to Australia. All right. Who is Carl Gene Fordham?
I'm a Queenslander, if that helps.
Yeah, you're a Queenslander.
Born in Brisbane. I grew up in Hervey Bay. It's a small coastal town in Queensland, and I'm a language nerd, like most of us, obsessed with languages. And
what's your language pair?
Chinese and Mandarin.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very long story, but essentially I was very lucky to have the chance to start learning Chinese in primary school.
So in primary school you started learning Chinese. In primary school they taught us Italian. Wherever you went to primary school, probably it had more insight into the future there.
Well, either way, I mean, whatever language it is.
Was that in Queensland?
That was in Queensland, yeah.
And did you spend time in China? Or?
Yeah, lots of travel. We were very lucky. Actually, in high school, we had an immersion program where we did 4 subjects in Chinese from year 8 to year 10. Yeah.
Which school is this?
This is Urangan State High School, which is a small high school in rural or regional Queensland.
A very progressive rural high school by the sounds of it.
It was a freak, an accident, that I happened to have that opportunity.
Wow, fantastic. And you are practicing as an interpreter, I understand, as a court interpreter mostly, and as a forensic transcriptor and translator as well?
Yes. For the first, say, 13 years, I did pretty much all translation. And a couple of years ago, I sat the test, became certified for interpreting, and then nowadays I do mostly interpreting.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah.
Keeping you busy?
I love it. Yeah, it's my passion, and especially in the court, for me, that's the most exciting.
How often do you go? Do you go every day? Is there...
I wish I could go every day. Yeah, it depends. Nowadays we have a lot of remote jobs as well, which is really challenging.
Do you provide interpreting into other states as well with via remote interpreting?
Yeah, I mean, nowadays we have jobs, for example, ACT has a lot of remote jobs, even New Zealand, because often they can't get on-site interpreters.
How do you deal with the differences of the jurisdiction and the law? Because I mean, I would assume you would do a lot of preparatory work for your assignments.
Yeah, I mean, I've studied law informally. I started a law degree back in the day, didn't finish it. I recently finished a Diploma of Justice Studies. And
very good.
I love law. It's really, really interesting.
Fantastic. And what motivated you to get involved with AUSIT and then put your hand up for the presidency?
Well,
before that, how long have you been an AUSIT member?
Not long.
Not long.
Not
okay.
long.
Yep.
And I wanted to mention this today. I was practicing for about maybe 13 years before I even thought about becoming an AUSIT member.
Why is that? Was that because you didn't hear much about it, or?
I think it's visibility. A lot of practitioners, maybe they know about AUSIT. Obviously, the code of ethics is very important, but perhaps they don't realise what the benefits are. So, yeah, that whole time I wasn't a member, and then we had the Brisbane conference a few years ago.
That was my first, and I loved it. That's where we first met as well.
Yeah,
I think
it was. I had a fantastic time
eye-opening.
there. Yeah, and that just inspired me. And from that point onwards, I understood what AUSIT was.
Fantastic. What made you decide to put yourself up for the presidency?
Well, long story short, no one put their hand up.
It's a scary position.
That's the perception.
Yeah.
And no one put their hand up, and eventually people kind of looking at me going, would you like to step up? And I spoke to a lot of practitioners, and no one wanted to put their hand up. And so I thought about it for a long time, because obviously it is a big commitment. But after a while, I realized this is a very rare opportunity. If you think about it, it hardly ever happens that people around you are asking you to step up, and actually give back to your profession. So I said yes. Fantastic.
And you are a young practitioner into this position now. We were just having a little bit of a personal conversation earlier.
Fairly young.
You're 37.
37.
Yep. And you're as young as the AUSIT National Conference.
I didn't realise that until today. So there you go. 37th conference, yeah.
Oh, fantastic. Look, I was there when you gave your short but I thought inspiring and effective speech at the AUSIT AGM Saturday morning. And you mentioned three things there. And you talked about AUSIT facing some issues such as finance, visibility and influence. Can you break that down for me? Because you had them in levels of urgency as well, didn't you?
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that, please.
Yeah. I thought about it for a while. The vision of the president is very, very important, because it sets the tone, obviously, for the whole association. I wanted to make the message clear and fairly simple. I want to reach members and practitioners too, broadly. So in that 5-minute speech, which I think a lot of members were a bit shocked at how...
And look, you said 5 minutes. I timed it. It was pretty much bang on the dot 5 minutes.
Yep.
Well done.
Yep. I like to keep things short and sweet, because I think if you go on for too long, it dilutes the message. So I can go into it if you like.
Please. We've got more than 5 minutes today.
Whew, okay. Go into a little bit of detail. So starting with finance.
And you said that was very important for me. Sorry, I'll let you go in a sec. The level of urgency. So finance is third in line?
Yes.
Yes, let's start there.
Yes, in my view. I mean, it's not set in stone, but... So for members who perhaps aren't across this, essentially, we know AUSIT is a not-for-profit organisation. We're all about bringing real value to the profession, right? Representing the profession. And we've been in a situation where we've had deficits in the budget consecutively for a number of years. That deficit has grown over the years. Now, this is not...
The deficit's not the entire budget, though.
Exactly.
Like,
so
it looks like a pretty healthy budget in general. So let's point that out, please.
Yeah. So I wanted... Yes. So it's important to point that out because AUSIT is not for profit, obviously. We do have reserves, and that deficit is eating into the reserves. So it's certainly not an emergency. However, in my view, we need to bring it back so that there isn't a deficit. That means once we have that, let's say, breaking even or making a slight profit, then we can start thinking about how do we actually use those reserves? Because we really shouldn't be hanging on to all of this money and not actually reinvesting it in the profession. So get rid of the deficit and then reallocate. Not all the funds, obviously, we need emergency funds, but a lot of those funds can be reused. Yeah,
I mean, it's very challenging, especially I reckon in the last year or two. Cost of living's gone up.
Yeah.
I was just in the organising committee for the national conference, and we know the budget from last year, and you know, we were very much involved with the budget this year, obviously, and prices have gone up so much.
Yeah.
Yet we weren't able to obviously put the price up for membership as well as the ticket prices as well for the conference, for example. The prices compared to anything from venues to menus to hospitality to security to all of these went up considerably compared to last year and then even the year before. So we have that challenge. How are we going to deal with that, you think? Because, I mean, we know our practitioners, and as a practitioner and you as a practitioner, we don't make a lot of money. No. You know, so it's not like, oh, the fees of cost has gone up 60-70%, so let's just put the fees up that much. It's just we can't do it. So there's a challenge itself there.
Yeah, and look, I'll be completely transparent. I don't have a finance background, right? I'm not a figures person, you know, to be completely honest. And this is where I'm really looking for guidance from National Council members, but also the broader membership about how we can do better in the budget.
And what are your plans regarding that finance? How are we going to get that revenue going?
Yeah, we did have a special meeting a few months ago.
Are we allowed to learn a little bit more about that?
Of course.
Thank you. Because that special meeting, and you mentioned it, I was like, oh, it just sounds really secretive.
No. A lot of members perhaps don't realise this, but all the National Council meetings are open to members to observe. I really want to make that clear, okay? Because we want to be transparent. We want to show members what we're actually doing. And I think perhaps in the past some members didn't realise what we were doing because they didn't realise they could participate openly with National Council. So in terms of that meeting, we invited some of the veteran members of AUSIT, Sylvia, for example, to come on board and to help us nut it out. We're looking at both cutting costs, so how we can do that, and then also raising revenue. So there are a number of things we're looking at. The trick is to get the balance right because we don't want to obviously cut our value as we're cutting costs. I think one of the key things is the cost of admin goes up quite a lot with inflation. So looking at how we can trim the fat there, I think that might be more effective, but I am open to other suggestions.
Fantastic. And then you also spoke about visibility. What did you mean by that? And just before you said about, you know, when you were in Queensland, you were practicing for 13 years without being a member. Yeah. I guess we're talking about visibility for the practitioners and then visibility with other stakeholders. Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about visibility.
Yes, that's the second part of my vision. So visibility, I mean in terms of our fellow practitioners, right? Our colleagues who may not be members. That's what I'm referring to there. So I think perhaps past presidents might have focused on membership numbers, say, oh, you know, we need to increase the number of people who have signed up. For me, I don't think that's the right way to go. I think a more effective way is by showing the value of AUSIT both in public spaces and in member spaces. Because in my experience, and I think a lot of my colleagues have the same experience, which is that we took the initiative to sign up because we saw the value. The value is definitely there, it's just not being shown. So as long as we create opportunities where the value is being shown in public spaces, then colleagues will start to come on board. So that's what I meant by visibility.
What kind of value are we talking about here? Like, so, what is value for a practitioner?
And this is coming into our other conversation as well about the aims of our organisation. Obviously, PD is a big one because I've served as a year as the PD VP. It doesn't have to be just PD though.
It's got to be more than that.
Much more
PD wise, especially these days, there's a lot of PD
That's
out there.
Right. That's
right. There's paid PD. There's a lot of free PD.
That's right.
So it can't be just PD, in my humble opinion.
No, you're right. You're right. We have, I believe, very high quality PD.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
looking at other kinds of events or activities, and this is where I need members to step up and really think about this, where AUSIT is right in centre and people can see what we're doing. I don't have all the answers. That's why I need members to speak up on this.
And how do members speak up on this? We have branches as well, state branches, and you made a point of mentioning them as well in your speech. What do you think about the state branches?
This is really critical.
And the practitioner actually being active and involved within AUSIT as a member or as a non-member. What are your thoughts?
This is really critical. So in the past, I think quite often members of the public or members of AUSIT would go right to the president with lots of inquiries. When actually one of the strengths of AUSIT is that we have all of these branches in all of the jurisdictions of Australia, and they're very active locally. So we need to remind members that the branch is the best place to start, but also thinking about other committees. So, for example, ethics, you would go to the ethics ethics VP, rather than centralising, because I don't think centralisation is the way to go.
There seems to be a bit of a fashion towards that these days around the globe, though, right?
And look at the consequences of that when we burnt out presidents because there's too much stuff going up to the top of AUSIT.
Yes, I agree with you there. When I joined AUSIT as a student member, coming up to 10 years now, I'm a 2015 RMIT graduate. And to be honest with you, coming out of that advanced diploma degree, I didn't know much about PD and recertification, and for me, AUSIT wasn't a value place. It was more of a belonging place. I felt like I belonged to my community of interpreters and translators, especially when I realised that it was a very solitary profession, spending a lot of time in my car eating my sandwich, driving around to jobs. And more I got involved with my branch, more and more I went to these conferences. I started feeling that family, community, people, that connection. And I think there's a lot within that regards that AUSIT plays as well, which I don't think enough people touch on, to be honest with you. So, I mean, if we can do something about that as well, I'm getting goosebumps now because I'm on such a high from the conference and having my people around me.
I know.
From all around Australia and New Zealand, and I think there's a lot to be said about that as well. It's having that sense of belonging somewhere as well, I think.
You hit the nail on the head. I'll be stealing that because I think
that
idea
of the idea. I'm not the first one to say it. So.
Well, no, I thank you for pointing it out because that makes a lot of sense. It's the sense of belonging that membership can provide that needs to be promoted more.
Absolutely, and I know that in the past few years, AUSIT has been hosting forums. I know at a branch level in Victoria. We do social gatherings, but it's not just, hey, how you going, have a few drinks. We've created a WhatsApp group and we try to keep things quite professional there and talk to each other about jobs, about potential scams. You know, we've been getting a lot of these dud LSPs offering jobs and things like that, or people coming up with some curveball ethical situations, and we really share that in there. And I think, like you say, at the branch level, having that sense of community, yes, you know, PD is great and value for money is great, but I don't think that kind of a connection, you can't buy that. You can pay thousands and you can't buy that. So let's all work on that together as well.
I mean, wow. No, you're absolutely right. A couple of things to think about. One is we can learn from other professional associations. If you look at ATA, the American Translators Association, their use of language divisions has been really powerful. And I have to acknowledge Angelo, who has been a great supporter of language divisions.
Absolutely, Angelo.
That's another great way to boost that sense of belonging, in addition to branches.
Yeah, and that was the first time, I think, at this year's conference we had those language groups, and they were free of charge. You didn't have to be a member, and you also didn't have to have a ticket to the conference. And it was amazing to see. And I'm looking at LinkedIn posts now, yesterday and today, everyone just coming out of the conference and everyone posting from their language groups. And we had a handful, but there was a good turnout to those handful of languages. And I think that's a very, very good start. And everyone's posting saying, I've never seen so many, the one I saw was, that's it, I've never seen so many Spanish interpreters in the one room. You know?
I mean, shout out to the Spanish language colleagues, because they're a powerhouse. They're the first language division that we formed, and they're just so active. I attended the Chinese event. We had a really good turnout for that too. Yeah.
Fantastic. And I think if those numbers and the number of the languages grow as well, that feeling of connection is definitely going to come through.
Yes, and we will continue the tradition of virtual meet and greets each year. This year we had, gosh, how many did I organise? I think it was 38 or something. We had a huge number.
Wow, that's fantastic.
And carrying on Angelo's tradition, but adding more languages in, and we'll keep building on that.
Well, we're talking about 200 plus languages, so
it's a lot.
It's a good start, but there's still a long way to go. Okay, we spoke finance, we spoke visibility, and you also spoke in your number one priority position about influence. What do you mean by influence?
Yeah, this is a really big one. Probably the most important in terms of long-term vision. I've considered whether National Council should formulate a 3-year plan. We don't have to, but it's an idea to have something a bit more specific.
I like a long-term plan as well. I mean, you know, there's always, it's good to have short-term plans, but having that long-term vision, and even for the next president to come along and pick up where whoever's left it at. I think that's very important.
Yeah, really have to thank the National Council members for that suggestion. It's a big task. So, influence. I think it's probably the biggest, most important task we face. Where to begin? We know, obviously, in our profession, we have huge challenges ahead of us. Where to begin? AI, of course. Won't go into that, but that's obviously a huge one. Also, AUSIT's relationship with stakeholders is absolutely critical. It's a very complicated situation, as I'm sure you're aware, Fatih. We need to get the balance right. Remember, AUSIT is a professional association, so everything we do should be about the sustained growth of our profession. And we should not be getting sidetracked by irrelevant things that don't help us with achieving that goal. Now, with stakeholders, we have a lot of people in the room, and I think what happens sometimes is, because there are so many other stakeholders in our profession, AUSIT misses out. And that shouldn't be happening. AUSIT must be at the table when decisions are being made that affect our profession.
And we're talking about strengthening relationships with stakeholders. Can you give me a few examples of such stakeholders?
There's a lot. There's a lot. It's a very crowded room. Okay, so obviously we're AUSIT. We're a professional association. there's the union, which plays a very important role in terms of matters relating to industrial relations. So that's one example where AUSIT needs to differentiate very clearly what AUSIT does and what the union does. There are things we can absolutely work on and collaborate, but we don't want to step on each other's toes, and we don't want to repeat the same thing, right? Because that's a waste of time.
But support each other.
Absolutely support each other. Very important. Other stakeholders, obviously in Australia, our situation in this country is we have a lot of language service providers, obviously providing services, both private and public. So that is a very complicated situation where, again, AUSIT can look for common ground with LSPs. However, this is a very important point. We must remain independent of LSPs and also big corporate interests, because we've seen in other professional associations in other countries where the board of that association has become infiltrated by corporate interests. Now, AUSIT has a lot of strengths. I talked about the autonomy of branches is a fantastic strength, but another really good strength is that everyone on the National Council is independent from corporate interests. So that's one thing we have to safeguard, because that means when we volunteer our time, we're doing it for the profession. We're not doing it for any other reason. So that's another example. Other stakeholders, obviously working with the public sector. So working with government, whether it be elected representatives, but also working with the executive. So where to begin? There's a lot.
There is definitely a lot to unpack there. And I think AUSIT does have a huge role with these stakeholders and getting our profession out there. And, you mentioned AI a little bit, and just going back to Holly Silvestri's, and thank you, Holly, so much for coming all the way from the States. I'm sure you'll be watching this. And speaking about her experiences, and she spoke about, how we need to talk about what we do. People need to understand how important we are and what we do, and how we do it, how it all works. Yes, of course, technology is going to be advancing and we'll work with technology, but we really need to actively get out there and explain to people, unfortunately, educate them about our profession, right? And especially when it comes to bureaucrats and governments, it's a constantly turning wheel. So it can't be, unfortunately, that we go and explain everything once to a stakeholder and then you think your job is done for the next 5-10 years. But no, people keep moving, so you've got to keep doing it again. What are your thoughts on that? Is that a bit tiring for AUSIT to constantly, be in this battle of marketing itself or influencing, like you say? How are you going to deal with that?
That should be the role of the president.
Yeah.
So, but heads of branches, obviously, they can also do that with state governments, for example. So we need to, again, make sure that we're clear on what the council does and what the branches do when it comes to increasing
How are you
influence.
going to empower the branches? State governments are still very big entities, just as big as federal entities, and someone like the AUSIT national president might have a bigger influence than the chair of a state branch, for example.
So the president can absolutely create that relationship or strengthen that relationship. The head of the branch or other members, doesn't have to be the head of the branch, they have a very good understanding of local conditions. This is a key point, because we know that in Australia, the provision of services is really different in different states and territories. So I understand Queensland very well because I'm in Queensland, but I don't have that much understanding about other states, to be honest.
What are you going to do about that? How are you going to get to know the other states and territories? Is there going to be a lot of travel, a lot of cold calling, introducing yourself? Have you already made some connections? Because there were quite a few stakeholders at the conference. How did you go with introducing yourself and making new friends?
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to Assistant Minister Julian Hill, who spoke at the conference.
Gave a great keynote, by the way, didn't he?
Gave a fantastic keynote. Erica and I were just almost speechless, you know, like it's quite rare to see an elected politician or the executive government having a really good understanding of the challenges we face. So we had a really positive discussion with the department, and we're looking forward to working with them.
Absolutely, and from Home Affairs as well, Ali Mond gave a great keynote, the Jill Blewett keynote as well,
Yeah.
and it's so great to see government being involved. I've never seen it at this level before. I mean, I'm quite new to the game, I guess, compared to the history of all of this. But it was so great, especially at the conference, to have so many government stakeholders there. And I think there's a lot of movement these days. You know, we're talking about the migration review framework, and we're talking about the sustainability report. And there's a lot that needs to be fixed, but I think now is the time. You know, I've never seen so much interest and action from all stakeholders, and it's just good to see something looks like it's going to be done, I think. What do you reckon?
I'm hopeful. I'm optimistic, especially about next year in particular, because, like you said, government stakeholders, especially federal government, but also some state governments, are starting to understand that the current situation is not sustainable, and that they need to change their policies and also the way they implement the policies, especially around the way that services of interpreters are procured.
Yeah, that was a huge thing, procurement.
Yeah.
And I love it how the government's now talking about saying, you know, let's just say what it is, it's buying of services, you know, and we've been talking about procurement now, and I talk about it in the podcast as well, but now people really understand what that is. I think, in my opinion, and like you, I'm very hopeful as well. I think things are going to change, and I think they're going to be happening soon. That's the kind of vibe I'm getting.
Yes, and we will be there, the members of the National Council, to liaise with stakeholders when that time comes.
Carl, thanks for explaining all that to us. I've got a little bit of a feedback from our viewers as well, and sometimes they say, the podcast it is a little bit long, they say, okay? So I'm going to start wrapping things up, and I want to catch up with you again next year. We'll give you a few months to settle in, and then let's catch up again next year, maybe just before the Canberra conference, okay? And get an update from you, because there's a lot there. There's a lot that needs to be done there, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to be done in a year.
Correct.
All right. And I want to bring it to that. I don't want you to be just sticking around for 1 year and get burnt out. You know, we want to see you lead the institution, hopefully for at least 2-3 years. Because I think there's a lot to be said for consistency as well. But like I said, we don't want you to be burning yourself out, and I know that you're a teacher at University of Queensland, you're interpreting, you're translating, now you've got quite a big responsibility being the AUSIT National President. How are you going to balance your time with all of this?
Mental health. Mental health is really important. Self-care, and being really clear about what am I doing, right, in this role, and is the task I'm completing, is that going to further our profession? But even if it is, thinking then about, is it worth doing, right? Because we know obviously we're a growing organisation. I mentioned before, a lot of stakeholders involved. So I will be very selective about the tasks I take on. You're right, I don't want to burn out. But there's something else, which is that my dream is one day for there to be a perception that the president role is something really exciting, something really fulfilling, something that a lot of practitioners want to take on. You know, I find it a little bit sad that quite often we don't have multiple people putting their hand up for positions on council. I want to change that culture. I want people to look at the council and go, oh wow, I would aspire to be on that council, and it looks like a well-run council, and the tasks are clearly differentiated.
Yeah, there's. I think you've hit quite an important bit there. We don't really know what the council does or each position does, and how much work that entails. Yeah. Maybe a little bit of work could be done on that, just to educate the members about each of the positions, what they do, what they don't do. So when let's say I want to put my hand up for a position in the NC, I don't find out after the fact. I know more what I'm walking into, because it's not easy working either a full-time job or as a practitioner where you're interpreting during the day, translating at night, probably working on the weekend as well. Yeah. What do you think about that? What could be done about that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things there. Again, I want to encourage that culture of national council or branch level, of course, something to aspire to, and that, again, it's clear what the responsibilities are, but also not to put so much pressure on volunteers, right? Because I have to be frank that I've had a lot of conversations with members before the conference and after. A lot of conversations started with, oh, this is going to be a huge responsibility. Are you sure you want to do this? I even had one member say to me, oh, you're not going to last 3 months. So I want to change that culture. Well, there's a challenge. Yeah, okay. I want to change that culture. I want, again, people to look at the council and go, that looks like an exciting thing to take on, and that we can limit the amount of pressure and stress that's put on volunteers by being clear about what the responsibilities are.
People are more into audiovisual these days, or it's a big part of information dissemination. Yeah. What do you think about, a little video about AUSIT, what it does, what it doesn't do, and then breaking it down into the National Council sub-branches? I mean, almost like a bit of a marketing video. Because I know when you go into the AUSIT website, it explains everything there, but not a lot of people are into just written information. More and more these days, we're watching everything, we're listening everything. What do you think about something like that?
That's definitely something that AUSIT hasn't done well in recent years, which is the communication side. How do we adapt to new ways of disseminating information and new ways of engaging people? So that's definitely on the agenda, and part of that is, like you said, using things like video, but maybe short form content, perhaps a bit more, podcasts as well. Yeah,
I know they could be costly, but also it could be done by volunteering members as well, because there's so many different talents out there. Yeah. We're interpreting translation with maybe most practitioners, definitely with some. It's an additional profession. There's a lot of people with different backgrounds that they can bring in as well. So maybe like tapping into that talent pool.
That's something that I felt every conference I attended was, wow, look at the diversity of our membership. I don't think you would find an organisation with more diversity than AUSIT. Diversity obviously in terms of background, but also in skills, personalities.
That's yes.
It's absolutely incredibly rich.
Culture, personality. Very rarely that you'll find in another profession. Let's say a doctor. Okay, that they've also done law in the past, or they've done media studies in the past, or I know some of them, some of our members out there that have studied cinema, music. I think you don't get a lot of that diversity in other professions, like you say.
So there's a lot of potential in there that hasn't been tapped yet. And so again, I'll use this opportunity to call out to members or practitioners in general to step up. Get in contact with your local branch. That's usually a good place to start. Like Fatty was talking about, that sense of belonging that you get in the branch is second to none. You're not going to get that anywhere else. And in terms of contributions, we're looking at changing the way we work with members. I think sometimes AUSIT puts a lot of focus on committees and very formal structures. We're looking at using things like working groups, for example, where it's a little bit less formal. And I'll also be making sure next year that we try to reduce the bureaucracy, that we don't have this thing where we always follow certain processes just because that's the way we did it in the past.
Absolutely. Well, here's a call out then to members, non-members, join members. Get in touch with your local branches and speak about like what you enjoy doing, what your skills are, and say, how can I contribute?
Yeah, I'll be sending out a President's newsletter. I am making changes to that newsletter. I'm making a lot of changes to the way we're doing things because they have to be made in terms of avoiding burnout, but also being more efficient. But in the newsletter, I'll be talking fairly concisely about what our vision is for AUSIT going forward and how you can help.
Fantastic. Looking forward to it. When's the first Carl Gene Fordham newsletter coming out?
Very soon. I imagine it'll be out by the time this is published.
All right, well, looking forward to it. See who beats who, if this gets published or the newsletter.
We'll see.
If it's after the newsletter, I hope you've read it. If it's before the newsletter, make sure you read it. Well, I'm going to start slowly wrapping things up, Carl. It's been a fantastic chat. But I think our previous presidents, they have been presidents that people knew a lot about. They've been, I guess, academics that we have seen and worked with and studied under. For example, I really, really want to get a little bit more personal with you now.
I knew you'd get into this.
We do a lot, and I'm sure you do a lot, work, and it can't just be about work, right? And we said it's about balancing responsibilities. And I find it quite hard as well to find time to do other things. Like I said earlier, interpreting during the day, translating at night, doing all that on the weekend as well. And you spoke about mental health before. How do you unwind and what social things you do? What are you into? Do you have hobbies? Like I play board games with my mates once every month or so. What are you into? What does Carl do when he's got that little bit of time left to himself?
I was waiting for this question because I think it's the hardest question for me to answer, actually.
You're a very interesting fella, and I just want to know what you do when I don't see you.
I guess, I'm a language nerd, right? So even in my relaxation, there has to be language involved.
Yeah. And being a nerd is so cool these days. It's back in fashion, isn't it?
Is it? Okay. Calligraphy is a big one for me, Chinese calligraphy.
Wow, there you go. See, I had no idea about that one.
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
I lived in China for quite a few years, and I was very lucky to meet someone who became a kind of teacher or mentor in Chinese calligraphy. And the main focus with that is not on producing a work of art, but on self-cultivation. So as a practice to kind of center yourself, because you're using your hands and your eyes, it's a very meditative practice. And so that's, I guess you can consider that relaxation. It's something that I enjoy.
Gets you out of your brain a bit?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
What else? Calligraphy's one. What else? What kind of music do you listen to?
Gosh, I have a very eclectic taste in music because my dad is a massive music person. I also play instruments. Saxophone is one of them.
Oh, wow, fantastic.
Yeah. I listen to all kinds. I love jazz, for example. Yeah.
Ah, very good. I've always had this dream about, and I was thinking we do it like during the French La Fête de la Musique times, have like an interpreter-translator open mic night.
Wow, that would be cool.
What do you reckon?
I mean, yeah.
I'm sure. Like, email me, contact me, member musicians out there, so maybe we can put like an AUSIT band together.
AUSIT band, wow. Yeah, because it's interesting that a lot of people that are into language often do music. They tend to kind of go hand in hand, I think.
Yeah, I think it's like a similar part of the brain,
yeah. So a lot of my colleagues play instruments or sing, things like that, yeah.
Very good. All right, calligraphy, bit of saxophone.
Travel, of course. I was recently in Vietnam and China, just briefly. I love travel, but not to kind of tourist sites per se. It's again has to be language related. I'm very much into it's called Stella, which is inscriptions using Chinese characters.
Okay, wow.
In Vietnam, they used to use Chinese characters, so I enjoy going to historical sites and reading ancient Chinese. Yeah, I know it has to be language related.
I like it. That's very niche. It's a very niche travel idea. Yeah. Well, I asked for it, didn't I?
Yep, you got your answer.
Definitely a language nerd, and yeah, I love it. Fantastic.
Cool.
Look, I'll start closing our conversation now, and I will catch up with you again.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say to our viewers about your plans for AUSIT's future? I know we went into a little bit of detail, but just some closing remarks from you, please.
I think I've covered, most of what I wanted to cover today, and I'm just really grateful for this opportunity, Fatih. I was really looking forward to this, actually. Like months ago, I was like, I wonder if I'll be invited to the podcast, because it's kind of a tradition, I suppose.
Sure is. Has become one, yeah.
It has become one. So
we're coming to the end of our 5th season, coming to the 6th season. So
fantastic, because like I was saying to you earlier, there aren't many spaces where we can really do this. So really grateful for that.
No, it's your space, mate.
Yeah.
Always.
Look, I don't have too much else to cover. I think as members found out, I like to be concise and clear in the message. So just to sum up, our vision going forward is finance, visibility and influence. And we welcome working with any colleagues who would like to reach out. It doesn't have to be a formal role. We're happy for anyone who can lend a hand, even for small things. We're really grateful. So please reach out to your local branches.
Well, definitely reach out to your local branches. Carl, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, mate.
Absolute pleasure. Absolute pleasure. And we'll see where you're at in a few months' time, and we'll have another conversation. I just want to send another shout out to the AUSIT National Conference as well. It was an amazing opportunity to meet our family, meet our community, meet stakeholders, and to see so many people from different backgrounds, like you said, professionally, also culturally, and just to get together with them and share some very good quality time and conversations and learn from people. So big thanks to all the presenters with all the different points of view that they brought, whether it be from government, education, practitioner side of things. So big thanks to all the presenters, big thanks to all the volunteers, a big thanks to the National Committee, also the organising committee as well. I just want to drop some names there, to our immediate past president, Erica, who was leading us with the conference, but also to my other organising committee fellow friends, Ken, Elvira, Jess, Corinne, and everyone else who supported us. Big shout out, and I could not have asked for better people to work with, and I thought we did okay with the conference. I'm sure it could have been better, but I think it was pretty good.
No, it was incredible. It really was, and the turnout.
Turnout was fantastic. I think it was the biggest of all time.
Over 500.
Over 500.
Yeah.
Over 500.
Yeah.
So, like I said, a big thanks to everyone who participated. And big thanks to the sponsors as well, of course. Quite a lot of sponsors. The sponsorships growing, which is great. And it's not just LSPs. There was a lot of government in there as well, a lot of technology companies in there as well, which is great. So that influence you're talking about, I think there is something there for you already to get a momentum going. And good luck with all of that.
Thanks,
and wishing you all the best in your professional life, but also as our new president. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And dear viewers and listeners, thank you so much. This will be the last episode for 2024, and that was the end of season 5. We hope you enjoyed it. Please, if you haven't done so already, like and subscribe. That's definitely going to give us more visibility, and it's going to give us more opportunities to bring content like this to you. subscription is also a way of getting PD points as well, you know, if that helps. And this doesn't cost you anything. So please do like and subscribe, and we will see you in the new season for 2025. Wishing you a fantastic festive season, holiday season. Get some rest, enjoy your time off, and come back fresh and rejuvenated for 2025. There's a lot we need to do, and I think there's a lot that's going to happen in 2025. I am hopeful and I'm looking forward to it, and wishing you all the best, and see you in the new year.
See you next year.
Conversations Podcast.